Hey, y'all, it's Michelle with SLP Full Disclosure. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so excited to have joining us today Miss Janet Scull. Janet, welcome to SLP Full Disclosure, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Michelle.
Oh, I'm so excited. So, today's episode is going to be something that's going to be super, super helpful for all of our upcoming grads, our new grads. We're going to be talking about AMN's CF program, our Clinical Fellow Mentor program. It is such a vitally important part of that very first year when you graduate from school because I remember, Janet, I know you do too. Gosh, that first year is the scariest, most daunting year in your entire career. So I'm so excited to highlight this program and talk about all of the wonderful things that it offers to our new grads. But before we get started, I want to let you guys know a little bit about Ms. Scull. She is from Reading, Pennsylvania, and she was a speech pathologist for 34 years in Schuylkill Valley School District in Leesport, Pennsylvania. She worked with students in grades K through 12, but in recent years concentrated on grades K through 4. She also did per diem work as an SLP with home health agencies, skilled nursing facilities, rehab facilities, and hospitals in her 40-year career. Janet worked with AMN as a CFY supervisor for 2 clinical fellow students from October of 23 until December of 2024. She has 2 adult children, a son and a daughter, who reside in Chicago and San Diego. In her free time, she enjoys volunteering at a military food pantry and works as a substitute teacher at her former school district. So,
That's right.
wow, you have so much experience. You have worked in the schools, you've worked in rehab facilities, you've worked in nursing homes, you've worked in hospitals. How did you end up as a clinical fellow mentor? But you were like the perfect candidate for that job because you have so much experience. So tell us how you ended up with AMN working as a clinical fellow mentor.
Okay. Well, I like a lot of variety, so
It
I
sounds
kind
like it.
I kind of get bored being in the same position for a while, but I loved working in the school district. But I actually started out doing my graduate practicum at an inpatient rehab facility in the area. And I loved the work that we did. We worked mostly with stroke patients and head
Mhm.
injuries. I loved the team approach with working with OTs, PTs, cognitive retraining therapists. And I just loved working there. There was so much progress with the patients because they were
Mhm.
seen every day.
Wow.
And it just made you feel good that you could see a person make so much progress from being almost comatose when they came in to being able to at least do some talking and walking when they left. So
Wow.
it was a wonderful experience for me. And when I graduated, they actually offered me a job there. And I was like,
Okay.
sure, I could see myself working there my entire life.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, after 3 months, the census went down and I was let
Mhm.
go because I was the last one hired and I was
Right.
crushed.
Oh,
I just, was so sad because I just had such good rapport working with the people that I did.
yeah.
So, it being November, all the speech therapist jobs in the school districts were already taken. So, I ended up getting hired by an agency that staffed different nursing homes in the area. So I did that to fill out my clinical fellowship year. I had a
Mhm.
wonderful mentor there, but working in the nursing homes wasn't where I wanted to be. It was a
Yeah.
little depressing at times,
I
even
know.
though
I
yeah,
remember. I knew that when I did my clinicals there, was the first day I walked in, I was like, "Yeah, this is not for me." I think it takes
yeah.
a very special person to work with that population.
Yes, I agree. So, did that for 9 months, and then when the summer came around, I looked for jobs in the school district, and at that time, the intermediate unit in Pennsylvania was who hired the speech therapists and the special ed teachers and the audiologists for the school district. So, I applied and I was interviewed and I was given a job at a school district, Schuylkill Valley, and that's where I spent the next 34 years. So
Wow.
I loved it there. I still have good relationships with the teachers
Mhm.
and the staff and all the children, and you really have a family like atmosphere there.
And that's where you're substitute teaching now
Yes,
that you
that's where I
retired.
go back and I teach gym class and art and
Oh,
music and all the fun special classes.
How fun is that? That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
But I think that just listening to your history and your career just shows the diversity that so many speech language pathologists have. I personally do not have that diverse background in my professional life. I started with early intervention, went to the school district, and that's where I've been. So
Mhm.
I would be like a fish out of water if I had to go into a rehab. I mean, I honestly don't know that I could do it because it's such a very specialized type of care. So, gosh, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm
Oh,
excited. So, I
sure.
want to hear, I've heard a lot about the CF program that's offered by AMN,
Mhm.
but as a mentor, I want you to tell us, what is the CF mentor program? What is the purpose of that program?
Okay, well, the purpose of the program is to take a student, a CFY student, from the academic world into a clinical world. So they have to apply all the knowledge that they learned through the academic program at their grad school and then apply it to what they're doing in where if it's a early intervention program or school district or another facility. So we want to make sure that they're progressing from a little bit more dependent on us for feedback to becoming more independent and being on their own and feeling comfortable and confident in what they're doing.
Confident. That's the word right there, confidence. I feel like the younger generation, I know I have a 24-year-old daughter, and I feel like the younger generation is just so much more confident in themselves than I was when I first graduated. Like the clinical fellows that I have mentored were fantastic. I mean, they were so knowledgeable. They were so competent in everything that they did. And it's really amazing to me, and it's super cool to be in a role like you have, to be able to follow them through that first year and watch where they start
Mhm.
and just how they grow over the course of that year.
Right.
So you're there to just kind of be that listening ear and to be that person to answer those questions and provide that feedback to improve on their clinical skills, to improve on their assessment skills and those kinds of things. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And the two CF students that I just had and that just completed their program, they were wonderful. They were
Mhm.
confident from day one,
Mhm.
and it
Yeah.
was wonderful to see, but they have so much better training than I did. There's so many areas of speech therapy that were not addressed to me when I was in school.
Yes, ma'am.
Even things like swallowing skills. I did
Mhm.
not learn anything about how to help someone with swallowing problems until I was on the job in the rehab center.
Right.
Um, we didn't even know about autism until I was working in the school district and we had our
Mhm.
first student with autism enroll, and we were scrambling all the teachers that
Right.
worked with them and knowing what to do. So now these students are coming out better prepared. At least they have some snapshot of what to do if they have a student with those problems. But
Right.
we were like floundering trying to find on the job training to be able
On
to
the job
assist them.
training, right. So that kind of leads me into one of the questions that I had for you, and you've already answered it. Then do you feel like the new grads that are coming out have more training than you and I did? And it sounds like they do. I know
Oh,
I
they
had a friend of mine,
definitely do.
yeah, a friend of mine, Lynn Roebuck, was on and we did an AAC podcast. And she said that a lot of the graduate programs now are providing specialized direct classes in augmentative communication.
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like that kind of would have been nice to know because I get out, I go into the school district and I've got all these kids on devices, and you remember the wolf and the whisper wolf and all of those things that were so hard to navigate.
Mhm.
And so it's refreshing to know that the universities have kind of upped their game and they're providing more direct training because there is so much more out there now. But I think just access to information, just like
Mhm.
you said, these kids come in, these young grads come in, and they have just a wealth of knowledge because they're getting it from places like TikTok. They're following people on Instagram and all of these things. So, yeah, it's amazing to see how much more knowledge they have. So, as we're talking to our clinical fellows, what is their role in this clinical fellow mentor program? You're there to kind of guide them, direct them, answer those questions, and help improve on those skills across the board. How would you tell a clinical fellow that's getting ready to walk into that first year of their CFY, what is their role and how can they prepare for
O
that year?
Okay. Well, I think a lot of them are very well prepared, but they need to be open to feedback. And I
Mhm,
remember going through the CF program and just getting along so well with my mentor. And
mhm.
she was wonderful to me. She never made me feel like I was incompetent. If there were questions I had, she would answer them or demonstrate for me. So I
Right.
think the CFY mentees just need to be open to feedback and know that we're there to help them. They should not feel bad about asking any questions if they need more help with different strategies or even like access to materials. I
Mhm.
still have a lot of my materials from my teaching days, and I do
Mhm.
pass them on to former students just because, I'm kind of the ending of my career now, and I just want to give them what they need. And they are so novel with coming up with their own materials and
Oh, I
they
know, they're so
download things.
creative.
There's so much more out there than when I was a speech therapist and even going through um like teletherapy, there's so many more things online that they can access
Mhm.
to use with their students. But a lot of times they didn't need a lot of help. I would just be there to say, "You're doing a great job. Do you have any questions for me? Can I help you in any area?" And a lot of the time it was just minimal strategies to teach them, to show them that they're doing a great job, but maybe next time you could try it this way, or as far as behaviors with some of the students, things that they
Mhm.
hadn't come across. And I let them know this is their first year. There is so much to learn in this field. It is
Right.
constantly growing, and
Mhm.
they really need to feel good about what they know already.
Right. That's great advice. I think that one of the things we've talked about on this podcast before, I think Dr. Shannon Hill was on. She's my friend that's a BCBA. And you said something that kind of struck a chord with me. Being open to feedback and being willing to listen to that mentor. You have got a wealth of knowledge, and anyone who has you as a mentor would be absolutely, I mean, that would be the best thing in the world for them. But being open to that
Thank you.
feedback, and I think if I could give any advice, it would be to know your limitations and know, you're not supposed to know everything. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Know when to say, I don't know.
Hmm.
Right.
Yes, that is
Um,
good advice.
Do you feel like there has been, I know you haven't had a lot of clinical fellows, but do you feel like there's been one area where they tend to ask the most questions? Is it in the therapy part? Is it more with the evaluations? Is it more in the school district with the acronyms and just kind of the, how things flow in the school district? Because there's so much intricate detail in as
Hmm.
far as a speech referral versus a comprehensive evaluation versus who does this and who does that. So, do you feel like there's been one area where they're like, "Hey, this is where I have a question," and you're seeing that as the prominent question?
Well, with the two mentees that I just had, the way their intermediate unit worked, where they were placed, they would have a different therapist do the initial evaluation, and then they would just be assigned the student. So they would
Okay.
follow through with their other person's goals, and sometimes they weren't always pleased with the way the goals were written. And they would say,
Mhm.
"Does this even sound right?" And I say, "Well, I don't want to put anybody down, but maybe that's the way they write goals, but that's not the way I would have written the goals." And they were very vague and very unclear. And then when the child was seen after about a year and they would do a reevaluation, then that's when my mentees would do more testing at that point.
Mhm.
So they didn't have the initial evaluations to complete like I always did. So
Yeah.
they were lacking a little bit of that experience just because that's the way their program was run, that they did not do the initial evaluations. But
Okay.
but I was very glad to be able to sit in at IEP meetings and just to see the way the mentees were interacting with other staff members and parents. They really seemed comfortable in asking questions or giving suggestions. And
Mhm.
I know looking back many years ago when I started, I wouldn't have been that comfortable giving suggestions to older, more established teachers or even some of the parents that, had quite a few children in the program. So I'm very pleased to just see their overall confidence and and quality of care that they're providing.
That's amazing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the universities and
Oh,
the programs that
definitely.
these universities are cultivating and the training and the education that they're providing in those more specific areas. But I also think, Janet, it's the culture. I mean, it's the generation. I think this generation of young people who are coming out just have so much more confidence, and it's just a breath of fresh air to see that they're not afraid to put themselves out there
Mhm.
and to say, "Hey, this is what I know." I remember being put in a situation my first year, my clinical fellow year. Looking back, I was literally asked to change an assessment so that a child would qualify.
Ah,
And the comment was made, "It's just a matter of a few pluses and minuses." And I think back on that moment, I can still see the hallway, it's one of those moments that's just ingrained in your memory. And I think back and I think if I knew then what I know now, how I would have handled that situation, it would have been very different. Do you feel like the professionals that the young graduate students are working with, that they're open to the suggestions of these young kids? Because you said something a minute ago. They've got the confidence to offer these suggestions, but are their peers and the people they're working with who have been doing this for 15, 20 years, maybe even more, are they open to those suggestions from these young kids?
they have been, yes,
Mhm.
because a lot of the mentees I observed, I would go back maybe a couple months later and see that they were following through on the suggestions. Even
Yeah,
if it was like a preschool teacher, how she was helping with their language development, different
that's amazing.
strategies. And you always
And
think, well, preschool teachers are probably trained in how to improve a child's language and develop those skills, but probably not as much to the extent as a speech therapist would be.
right, and my friend Dr. Hill and I talked about the training that speech language pathologists have, and that we've got so much training in child language development and just child
Mhm.
development, overall child
Right.
development in general, that BCBAs don't have. And so those approaches are kind of the same. Everybody wants the same end goal, but how they get to that end goal can sometimes be very, very different
Mhm.
because of that very specific training that speech pathologists receive in grad school and just the
Mhm.
knowledge that we have.
Right. Right.
And I ask you that question because what I have seen is that very seasoned teachers, administrators, they're all very, very open to what these young kids, I mean, it's just like, hey, yes, we've got someone new, we've got someone young. And like you said, they're so innovative, they're so
Mhm.
good with technology, all of the
Oh,
stuff out
yeah.
there with AI. I know my daughter uses AI all the time. And I'm just like, wow, she teaches math and she's using AI to help with um, coming up with different problems. And she'll just be on her computer and talking to the computer, write me a program on how to solve a linear equation and blah, blah. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? And she's like, I'm just trying to come up with, a different way
Well,
for them, to give a problem related around a certain subject. It's amazing.
yeah.
Wow. So the CF Mentor program that AMN offers is amazing. We have wonderfully experienced mentors like Janet that are here to help you through that first year that can be very scary and very daunting. But obviously, it's a year of learning and it's
Mhm.
designed to be a year of growth. And if
Mhm.
you come in as a mentee with that open mindedness, like Janet was talking about, being open to accepting that feedback, asking questions, and knowing your limitations, it's going to be a hugely successful year and you're going to go on to an amazing career. How do you what piece of advice, one piece of advice, I ask this of all of my guests. What piece of advice would you give to new grads as they enter their clinical fellowship year?
I think it goes back to knowing there's so much to learn in this field. It is constantly changing. Even after 40 years, I'm still taking continuing education credits to learn more, things that I was never taught, and just new areas that just come into play. So you have to be willing to learn more and admit that you don't know it all after your first year, and
Mhm.
just that the mentors are there to help, and we don't want to criticize. We're only there to make you a better therapist. And, you're already knowing so much more than I did my first years of teaching that I think, you have it, you can do it, and just be open to it and enjoy the ride. There are so many memories you're going to have from your career, people you've helped, ones that you run into years later, and you know you made a difference in their lives.
Oh, Janet, that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
so much for joining us today. It has been wonderful talking to you and getting to know you. If you guys have any questions about the CF program that is offered by AMN, you can find us on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. And you can also find us at SLP Full Disclosure on TikTok. You guys have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.